Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. A reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8. Chapter 7, Lord Shiva saves the universe. Today's verse is number 10. Sura Surendra Pujavirya Vepitam. Sura Surendra Bhujavirya Vepitam. Number 9. Tam utitam bhiksha kulachalam puna sambudyata nirmatitum sura suraha tadhara prishtena salaksha yojana prastarina dvipa iva paro mahan. When the demigods and demons saw that Mandara mountain had been lifted, they were enlivened and encouraged and began churning again. The mountain rested on the back of the great tortoise, which extended for 800,000 miles like a large island. Continuing with text number 10, second line down. Paribrahmantam Girim Anga Prishtatata. Paribrahmantam Girim Anga Prishtata. Bibrat Tad Avartanam Arikachapo. Bibratad Avartanam Arikachapo. Mene Anga Kanduyanam Aprameyaha. Meninga Kanduyanam Aprameyaha. Sura Surendra Bhujavirya Vepitam. Paribrahmantam Giramanga Prishtataha. Bibrat Tad Avartanamari Kachapo. Meninga Kanduyanam Aprameyaha. Sura Surendra Bhujavirya Vepitam. Paribrahmantam Giramanga Prishtataha. Bibrat Tad Avartanam Arikachapo. Meninga Kanduyanam Aprameyaha. Vibratad avartanam adikatshapo. Mininga kanduyanam aprameyaha. Surasurendra bhujavirya vepitam. Hripramantam girim anga prishtataha. Vibratad vartanam adikatshapo. Mininga kandu. Vaishnavis. Sura surendra bhuja virya vepitum. Sura surendra bhuja virya vepitam. Paribramantam girimanga prishtataha. Vibratadavartanam adikatshapo. Mininga kanduyanam aprameya. Sura asura indrai. By the leaders of the demons and the demigods. Puja virya. By the strength of their arms. Vepitam. Moving. Pariramantam. Rotating. Girim. The mountain. Anga. O Maharaj Parikshit. Prishtataha. On his back. Bibrat. Bore. Tat. Of that. Avartanam. The rotating. Adikatshapaha. As the supreme original tortoise. Supreme original tortoise ki. Mene. Considered. Anga kanduyanam. As pleasing scratching of the body. Aprameyaha. Unlimited. Translation. O King, when the demigods and demons by the strength of their arms rotated Mandara mountain on the back of the extraordinary tortoise, the tortoise accepted the rolling of the mountain as a means of scratching his body, and thus he felt a pleasing sensation. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always unlimited. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his body as a tortoise, held on his back the largest of mountains, Mandara Parvata, he did not feel any inconvenience. On the contrary, he apparently felt some itching, and thus the rotation of the mountain was certainly very pleasing. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Dena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Uta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Krupa Sindhu Bhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gopremanande Haribo Sura Surendra Arbhuja Virya Vepitum Paribhramantam Giramanga Prishtataha Vibrat Tad Avartanam Adi Kachapo Meninga Kanduyanam Aprameyaha. O king, when the demigods and demons, by the strength of their arms, rotated Mandara mountain on the back of the extraordinary tortoise, the tortoise accepted the rolling of the mountain as a means of scratching his body, and thus he felt a pleasing sensation. In the first canto of the Bhagavatam, the sages at Naimasaranya, who had gathered to hear the pastimes of Krishna and to hear about the ultimate goal of life, as Vayam tu navitrupyama uttama shloka vikrame yachchinvatam rasagyanam svadu svadu pade pade. We never tire of hearing of the activities and pastimes of the Lord, because they're ever fresh. Over and over again we can hear of them. And as Prabhupada mentions in the Nectar of Devotion, not only the pastimes of Krishna, but anything in relationship with Krishna is interesting to the devotee. The devotees of Krishna, the paraphernalia of Krishna, all of them are of interest. And throughout the Bhagavatam, we're hearing the discussion between Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami, and Parikshit Maharaj is inquiring about the activities of the Lord and great wonderment, so much wonderment that he can't sleep 24 hours a day for 7 days without drinking any water. They're hearing these pastimes of the Lord. For the devotee who has faith in these pastimes, they're always of interest. I saw on the internet a while back somebody who was complaining about the Hare Krishnas, and they said that there's life after Hare Krishna. You don't have to subscribe to hearing about talking turtles and snakes. She was disturbed that we have narrations of various animals speaking and so forth, and said this is too outrageous to accept. But for the devotees, nothing is outrageous. The Lord's pastimes become newer and newer, and he does amazing things. The foundational aspect of the spiritual world is adbhuta, or wonderment, and that is that at every moment Krishna seems new and fresh, and it's as if one had seen him for the first time. And also nitya navanamaya vayamana. It's mentioned in the Krishna book that the pastimes of the Lord can be heard over and over again, and they're ever fresh. To my mind, hearing about this gigantic tortoise, the Lord appearing as a turtle, it's at once amazing and also humorous in a way. And hearing about how he's relieving the itching on his back by this huge mountain, it's so audacious and outrageous to put a mountain on your back to scratch it. I mean, some people go to Chinatown and they'll buy a little back scratcher. That's the little jiva, he gets one of those. But Krishna, put a mountain, mandara mountain on my back, and I'll scratch that. It's just outrageous. It's just outrageous, and it's funny at the same time. In fact, walking around Govardhan Hill, there's a kund called Yugala Kund, and there is, according to the local tradition, one of the places where Krishna performed his pastimes with the cowherd boys, and they swim in that kund, and over again the boys asked him to show the different incarnations. So he'll show the Matsya and then the Kurma, and they'll say, do it again. Just to amuse his friends, he's showing these different incarnations as a Matsya and Kurma and so forth, and Varaha and so forth. They're always interesting and always transcendental, these forms of the Lord. And why can't the Lord appear in such a form? Someone who is atheistic or who has no faith cannot understand how the Lord is unlimited. And that's what Prabhupada says in the purport. The Lord is unlimited. That means you can't limit him. You can't say he can't do this or that. He can appear in any form as he likes, and he does. And interesting in this pastime is that the demigods and the demons are somehow or other cooperating together because they want something. This is the plight of the material world, that if you want something, then you're going to have to cooperate with people you don't like so much to get it. There's always a compromise. As soon as I have a material desire in my heart, then I need some special tincture, some nectar they want here. And all this started actually because Indra was riding on his elephant Airavata, and Durvasa Muni saw him going by, and he offered a beautiful flower garland to him. So Indra, as usual, sometimes, we hear so many times, he took the flower garland, and he was feeling so high and mighty riding on his elephant that he took the garland and he just threw it to his elephant. Airavata caught it in his trunk, and he said, what do we need a garland for? And he threw it on the ground and trampled it. And Durvasa Muni looked at him and said, I curse you. I curse you to be bereft of your opulence because you're so puffed up. So then Indra lost his opulence, and that's what started this whole pastime. That they had to go and beg to Lord Vishnu. We lost our place again, and this keeps happening. You see all the way through the 6th canto. Indra's sitting on his throne, and the demigods are all worshiping him, and there's music and dancing and everything, and he's thinking, I'm pretty cool. You know, this is not bad. And then his spiritual master walks in, and he thinks, yeah, he comes here every day, so no big deal. And the spiritual master, as soon as he walked in the room, he could feel the atmosphere. This is the enemy of the jiva, this enjoying spirit, that I see something in the material world that's mine, that I can enjoy. Jayato vishayan pumsam sangasteshu pajayate. The beginning is, I look out and I see something and I think, that's for me. This is what contemplation means. I look at it and I think, I could take that. I could use it. And as soon as I do, I make a sangha, an association with it. It's a false association. It's a illusory association, just like in a dream. It's a mirage. But still, now it's a problem for me. Now I have to carry it around, and I have to make so many arrangements. Prahlad Maharaj rails against this kind of thinking in his prayers in the 7th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th chapter. And he says, Kutra Shisha Shuti Sukham Mrigatrishni Rupa. Where is this happiness you're looking out for everywhere here in the material? Where is it? Kutra, show me. Kutra Shisha Shuti Sukham. You hear about it all the time, but did anybody ever get it? Did you ever get it? Best time was right before you got it. Once you get it, it starts to diminish. It becomes a problem for me. So Indra was sitting in that throne, and his spiritual master came in, and he thought, no big deal. Spiritual master comes every day, and besides, I'm pretty comfortable right now. And then the spiritual master could feel immediately the vibration, so he turned around and walked out. And then Indra came to his senses, and he jumped up, and he ran out to find his spiritual master to offer his obeisances, but he was gone. Brihaspati, he just disappeared. And then the decline of the demigods began. And Prabhupada goes into great detail. In fact, even he says that the demons, that sometimes they lose their opulence because of offending Shukracharya, showing the importance of respecting one's acharya, one's guru. And then the demigods had to go at that time and pray to Brahma. and say, Brahma, what do we do now? We've lost everything. We lost all our opulence. And Brahma told them that now you have to get a new spiritual master. So you can go to the son of Twashta, named Vishwarup. And Vishwarup is a qualified Brahmin, and he can offer the sacrifices for you, and you'll be able to reattain your auspicious position through performing the yajna. Only one thing you'll have to tolerate is that Vishwarup has a little bit of affinity for the demons also. So he'll be on your side, but also the demons, so you have to tolerate. So they went to Vishwarup, and Vishwarup also informed them about the Narayana Kavacha, which he had received from his father, Twashta. And he began performing yajnas for them. And then Indra one day saw that this Vishwarup was offering one for the demigods, one for the demons into the fire. And he couldn't tolerate it. So he cut off the 3 heads of Vishwarup, which subsequently turned into 3 different kinds of birds, apparently. 2 partridges and a sparrow. And then there was this sinful reaction that came to Indra for killing his spiritual master. And he had to atone for that. He made some deals. I won't go into all the details, the deals he made with earth, trees, women, and water. Water, he said, okay, I will go into the details. Why not? We're talking about a huge tortoise, so I can say anything I want. That he said, water, you take the benediction that anything that you're added to will increase the volume naturally. But you'll have bubbles. That's part of the sinful reaction. And women, he said, you can maintain unlimited desire, lusty desire all the time, but you'll have, once a month, you'll have menstrual period. And for the trees, said, whenever you're cut, you'll grow back your limbs, and the twigs will grow back naturally from that. But the curse was that they would give sap. And for the earth, there would be deserts. But whenever somebody digs a ditch, it would fill in naturally. So anyway, Indra dished off his sinful reactions, made some arrangement, and then they were faced with the next problem, which was that the father of Twashta, the father of Vishwarup, Twashta, became incensed by Indra killing his son. So he created this huge demon named Vritasura. Vritasura appeared, and now the demigods realized that we're really in trouble. So they began to pray to the Supersoul in their heart. And so fervently they prayed to please save us, that the Supersoul then appeared. And Krishna manifested his form externally, and they prayed to him, please save us. So then he told them that you have to fight against Vritasura with a thunderbolt. And that thunderbolt you have to get from the bones of Dadancha. His name's Dadancha, but some people call him Dadichi. So Dadancha was the great sage. And Dadancha had applied this Narayana Kavacha and was also very advanced. And the Lord told him that you go and ask for his bones as a donation, and that he'll give it. But at first he'll protest because he'll want to hear a little bit about self-realization and the importance of giving in charity for the right cause. So they went to Dadancha, and sure enough, he said a few words of protest, and they convinced him very easily. He was already willing. And very interestingly, he gave up his body for the higher cause of assisting the demigods by giving his body in charity. This is very instructive, that he told the demigods that I'll have to give this body up anyway. So preemptively, it's better to give it up. preemptively it's better to give it up. I had this experience in a very personal way one time about preemptive giving. Better to surrender rather than wait till surrender is forced upon you. Better to give now rather than waiting to give your donation later. I was bathing in Radhakund on the Parikram and Govardhan Hill halfway around. We stopped at the Radhakund at about 7 in the morning, and I got into a gamcha. I put all my clothes right on the bank of the Radhakund, and it had a few things in it, including some cash and pen, notebook, and other such things that I consider useful. And then I said my Gayatri, and I turned around, and all my stuff was gone. So, needless to say, I walked home in a gamcha the next six or 7 miles. And all the way I was thinking, I was staying at the ashram, and before I leave the ashram every year, I stay there for 30 days and then leave. I was thinking I normally give a donation the day before I leave, and I was thinking, I'll give my donation now. Because I was thinking, realizing anything can happen, anything can be taken from me at any moment. And therefore, better to give now and surrender as soon as possible, rather than to wait until it's taken away by force. And then you don't get anything. You just say, oh, my stuff was taken. I meant to give it, but it doesn't count. It's too late. So Dadancha showed this example of selfless devotion. Meanwhile, the demigods are trying to get his bones so that they can fight off Vritrasura, which ended in a battle between Indra and Vritra. And, of course, the first time that Vritrasura approached Indra, he was very formidable, and Indra threw his mace, and Vritra caught it in his left hand nonchalantly, and then threw it back and hit the elephant of Indra, knocking him back 9 yards and injuring him. And all the demigods and demons who were watching, they applauded. They said, very good, very nice move. And then Indra healed the elephant with his nectar-giving finger. And then again, they took up the fight, and this time Indra threw his thunderbolt, cut off one of the arms of Vritrasura, then he cut off the other arm. Then Vritrasura began to open his mouth so wide that he could swallow everyone. And he swallowed Indra. But because Indra had applied the Narayana Kavacha, this armor made out of these mantras that he received from Vishwarup, he survived inside the stomach of Vritrasura, was able to come out of the abdomen. Vritrasura had already sat down and was in samadhi, waiting to go back to Godhead because he was a great devotee. This is all summarized, of course. And then Indra, with the thunderbolt, cut off his head. It took 1 year to cut off his head. And then Indra again had to suffer the reaction for killing a Brahmin. He killed Vritrasura, but then he was being chased by a tubercular woman. Everywhere he went, he finally hid himself in a lake in the stem of a lotus flower, and there practically he starved because the person bringing him the remnants of sacrifice was Agni, and he was afraid to go in the water. Now this may sound like many details and convoluted story, but that's the story of the material world. That as soon as I want something here, then I have to go through so much trouble to defend what I have, to take care of it. Better, like Dadancha, to make a positive determination to surrender early and often, and as soon as possible. And in such a way, one will avoid all the trials and tribulations of the material world. And now I'll take some reflections and questions. Yes, Banabhata Prabhu. Can we have the microphone?
Thank you, Varu, for your enlightening class. I have a question about the sap coming from the trees. Does that mean we shouldn't take maple syrup because is that technically the sap of a tree?
I hope not. Anything else? Yeah.
What about the bubbles in the 7-Up? 7-Up.
I don't know.
Bubbles.
Prabhupada took 7-Up. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It seems like there is a constant fight between science and the scriptures. For example, in scriptures it says Ganga Jal is very pure. It never be contaminated. The water of Ganges. But recent study in Science, one of the newspapers, it showed that drinking Ganga water, it can cause cancer. It may cause cancer. So which one to follow? Sometimes if you want to follow science, then you have to neglect what Shastra says. But Prabhupada says you have to follow Shastra. So there is always a constant fight between science and the scriptures. Can you explain a little bit on that?
I don't know that there's a constant fight against science and scripture. There may be different approaches to getting one's information in the world. The way that devotees get their information and they come to know something. Science means to know, how you come to know something. So the devotees accept the authority, a perfect eyewitness who can tell you what's going on from a superior source. They consider this and the Shruti, hearing from a perfect source, to be the way to get knowledge. Science relies mostly on investigation using the limited senses. So there's a way in which when we are dealing with situations in which we hear, for instance, that the Ganges water is pure, this is true, but at the same time, if you go to the Ganges and you see that there was some chemicals released from a industrial plant upstream, why be foolhardy and simply drink the water? Even sadhus, they strain the water and so forth. They don't simply declare that, oh, it must be pure because the Shastra said it's pure. Prabhupada does mention that devotees, when they see bubbles, foam, and mud, they go into the water and they push it out of the way and they simply take their bath and they remain healthy. But if you have some other information that there's been some poison in the water, for instance, the Jamuna lake was poisoned at one time by Kaliya. I mean, Jamuna is always pure, but at one time, Kaliya went in the lake and he poisoned everything. And then the devotees who came and drank from it died. And Krishna had to revive them. So you have to, discretion is the better part of valor. You have to discriminate and use your common sense as well. Yes, Navina?
Hare Krishna. I have a short anecdote and a question. I was distributing books in Bali near the beach on the road, and I met a young couple from the UK, and they bought books, and then I asked them, what are you doing here? Because they looked too scruffy. They had a lot of metal in their face and tattoos, very kind of unusual for this place. And they said, we're on our way to Antarctica, we go in Australia and then to the South Sea to try to prevent the Japanese from killing the whales. So they go on a little boat between the hunters and the whales. And I thought, it's pretty amazing because they're ready to die in the South Sea for a bunch of fish. It's a very dangerous position. So what am I ready to die for today? And I was kind of inspired by their sacrifice, which seemed very mundane, but still there was a sentiment there. So my question to you is, surrender and this Sharanagati, it's a instantaneous, but it's also a gradual process. But sometimes when we are kind of pacing ourselves, the tendency is that it becomes a little calculative, or incremental, so to say. So the tendency is that I might think, okay, I'll surrender this much today, and the rest I'll leave it for whenever. And that whenever may never come. So could you say something on full surrender now, at the same time we sustain life as we know it to continue our service?
Well, we have to live a life of in preparation to surrender, putting oneself in the best possible situation in which one can take every advantage of whatever good opportunities Krishna gives us to surrender. It's that put yourself closer and closer to the edge so that Krishna could easily push you over when needed. Great discoveries come only unto the prepared mind. And if one is constantly preparing oneself to surrender, looking for an opportunity to surrender, then Krishna will give those opportunities to surrender. It means accepting those things which are favorable, rejecting things which are unfavorable, praying for opportunities to have good association and so forth, and then the intelligence to take advantage of it. And then when those things come, we can actually surrender in that we take full advantage. In the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna tells Uddhava Sve Sve Adhikariya Nishta Saguna Parikirtita Viparyos to dosha syad Ubayor eva nishchayaha. It's a fixed principle that one who acts according to one's adhikari, the qualification that one has now, that is a good quality, he says. Saguna parikirtita. It's a good quality if one acts according to one's qualification. And then he says, viparya to dosha syad. The opposite is true, that if you try to do what you're not qualified for now, then this is a fault. And he says, Esha Nishchaya, this is a fixed principle. The Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that one should surrender as much as possible, and one should take advantage of whatever opportunities Krishna gives. One should also, he says, not try to do more than one's qualified for, and also one should not do less than one's qualified for. And then he gives the example of climbing a ladder, and he says when you put your foot on one rung and you know that it's stable, then you move up and you take the next rung, and you move up the ladder in that way steadily, moving up. It's unseemly for those who are not yet in a position to do so, for instance, to go off and perform some severe austerities. In fact, in the 11th canto, it's also mentioned sometimes people try to control the tongue by fasting for a long period of time. And then the tongue rebels after the fasting period is over and comes back and says, now you owe me 10 times as much because you starved me. And in this way, the devotee wavers back and forth. And in the initial stages of devotional service, there are various symptoms of unsteadiness which one can observe. They're described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the Madhurya Kanambani, beginning with early zeal. Utsahan Mai, one becomes overly enthusiastic, that I'll just charge to the top. But generally, that charge is met with a little more resistance than one might have imagined. I like Kalakanta gave a class in Mayapur 2 years ago, and he was saying, 2 years ago? It's amazing how fast time is going. But he was saying how Charu Prabhu was in Australia, and he asked Prabhupada a personal question. He said, so how long does it take to actually to develop a real taste for the holy name? And then Prabhupada, he said, waited about a minute, and then he said, 40 years. Such a nice answer. 40 years. So, yes, you should surrender early and often, but take advantage of those things that are authorized, first of all, that are in line with the the movements of a previous Acharya. Don't try to be more Catholic than the Pope, and then try to see how the ways in which the Acharya has shown what's appropriate kinds of surrender and so forth, and follow that steadily throughout one's life. Actually, just remaining steady is always meritorious. It's always glorified. In fact, steadiness can't be faked. A lot of other things can be faked, but steadiness can't be faked, because you actually have to show up and be there on time and be there for your service. That's great surrender. Just be steady. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, don't try to be a great devotee, just try to be a good devotee. That's okay. Just be a good devotee over time. A big shot's just a little shot who keeps on shooting. And if you just take the shots that you can now, take what you can now according to your adhikari, which is surrender for you, and you go over a long period of time, and then when that steadiness is established, then Krishna recognizes that person. All the devotees recognize someone who's steady. It just comes out. It becomes self-effulgent, and then the devotee knows for him or herself that this process is working for me. And one doesn't have to hold a ticker tape parade or anything. One knows that I'm no longer harassed by the internal pushings of the senses and the mind and so forth. I'm becoming free. And that happens in due course of time by steadily hearing and chanting and so forth. Something. Yes, Dravida Prabhu.
About Kurma from the 12th canto?
Yeah, and it reminds me, I had more to say about the verse. I diverted it into another pastime, but I'm going to say more about it.
You did very well. Thank you. Thank you for your...
Very good.
Ready for this? This is from the 12th canto.
12th canto, okay.
About Kurma.
Oh, good.
Right at the end, practically the end of the Bhagavatam 12:13-2, it is said, I won't read it in Sanskrit, when the Supreme Lord appeared as Kurma, a tortoise, his back was scratched by the sharp-edged stones lying on massive, whirling Mount Mandara. And this scratching made the Lord sleepy. May you all be protected by the winds caused by the Lord's breathing in this sleepy condition. Ever since that time, even up to the present day, the ocean tides have imitated the Lord's inhalation and exhalation by piously coming in and going out.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Just behind you. What is your name? Bhakti Jack.
Thank you for a very nice class. I like that there's always a smile ready to burst out of your face. It's very pleasant. I had a question about your wanting to give a donation, like when your clothes were stolen. I heard that, I read from Srila Prabhupada that like in previous ages, you would get sinful reaction just from thinking something, but you would also get pious reaction just from thinking something. And one of the benefits of the age of Kali is that you don't get sinful reaction from just thinking something, but you actually do get like a pious reaction from just thinking, I want to give a donation, like I want to do something nice for somebody. You get the reaction as if you did.
That's if you don't have the money. I was walking with Madhava Maharaj once around Vrindavan, on Vrindavan Parikram, and he wanted to go off. He always wants to go off to some wild place way off the beaten track, and I just like to stay on the path. And he was like, let's go to that tree. And I was like, let's not, and keep going. And he said, no, come on, let's go to the tree. And I said, I'll just meditate and go to the tree. He said, that's fine as long as when prasadam time comes, you just meditate on eating prasadam. So if we don't have something like Vasudev, Devaki, they gave charity, they were in prison. That's okay. If you don't have it, you can then, by meditation, if you can't do your puja, then you can do manasa puja. But if you have everything in front of you and you don't do it, you're just lazy. You know, the wife comes home and the husband says, I almost cooked you dinner. Right? And I think, oh, I almost thanked you. But this almost, you know, if you have it and you don't do it, that's laziness and it's neglect. But if you honestly don't have it, you're bereft But then out of your heart of hearts, you say, I wish I could give, and you give and give and give, then it's accepted. So Krishna, he knows what you're keeping back, and that's what he wants, really, not what you're giving so much. It's what you're holding back. Behind my back, I have something. That, yes. Okay. Yes. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for a very amazing class. Hare Krishna. I have a question. You mentioned in the beginning of your class about somebody criticizing the scripture. So one of my friends lately been criticizing scripture, devotees, because somebody offended him, and also Maha Mantra. So what do you say to them, that kind of person, or do you talk with that kind of person at all, or because I don't know how to respond. I'm just trying not to read what he's writing in order not to affect me.
Somebody that you're in association with then turned sour and began
Yeah,
criticizing process
it's
of Krishna
mostly through the
consciousness?
Facebook, but I know it's just my ex-classmate, which we're having conversations, and he sounds very disappointed, but at the same time I feel this criticizing also affects me, and I don't want to be really hearing that. So what do you suggest? Do I say to him something, which I try, of course, but...
Well, Shastra suggests, Ishvare taradineshu balisheshu dvisatsucha prema maitri kripopeksha yakaroti samadhyamaha. For the preacher moving about in the world, there are 4 entities, 4 categories that you'll meet. One is Krishna. So for Krishna, you have to give prema, your love. And then for the devotees, you have to make appropriate friendship, become very close to the devotees. The Bali Sheshu means the body of people who are innocent. They're open for Krishna consciousness. Then you give kripa. You pour in your mercy. And for those who are envious, Ishvare taratineshu Bali Sheshu Dvisatsuja. Dvisatsu. Dvisatsu means they're envious of Krishna. Then you give upeksha, which means you become indifferent. You avoid them. You don't interact with them. So best not to associate with those or spur them on, those people who have become very envious or vitriolic against Krishna and the scriptures. However, there are always various circumstances, and that's when you have to make fine discrimination. Sometimes Prabhupada wrote one letter to the devotees in Europe saying that we're in an insane asylum in this material world, and everyone thinks they're somebody they're not. He said some people are walking around in the insane asylum and think, I'm Napoleon, and someone else thinks I'm Winston Churchill. But they're none of these things. And then he said sometimes the patient will hit the doctor out of madness. And so as we're preaching, as we're teaching Krishna consciousness, associating with others, sometimes we'll be abused, neglected. Sometimes they may say something out of the sense of being mad. They're mad. And the doctor has to be expert and know how to take care of the person properly. The Shastra says avoid them, and you shouldn't hear it yourself. You should just give them a wide space so that they don't increase their blasphemy and they'll injure themselves more. If they see you and they say, oh, I hate Hare Krishna and so forth, at least they're saying Hare Krishna, but if they become very offensive, then it's worse for them, so better not to spur them on. But you have to, sometimes you can discriminate, and we've seen many times people who have turned around and become cured of their aversion to Krishna consciousness in certain ways. So it's kind of a subtle answer, but basically avoid. You can have my permission to defriend them if you need to on Facebook. Vanchakalpadrubhascha kripasinnavevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Go Premanande Haribo. Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.